Back in my day, the cool thing to eat at school lunch was a Lunchable. But in 1934, it was peanut butter and tomato soup, a butter sandwich, a hermit cookie, and an apple and milk. So thank you to Wondrium for sponsoring this video as we make school lunch from the Great Depression, this time on Tasting History. So using an old menu from 1934, I'm going to put together an entire meal for a school lunch today, but really, there are only two things I have to make, and that's the peanut butter and tomato soup and the hermit cookie. Now the menu, along with the recipes, come from the cookbook School Lunches with Recipes to Serve 50 Children. That title, To Serve 50 Children, kind of reminds me of that Twilight Zone episode.
To serve, man, it's a cookbook!
But I assure you there are no children used as ingredients in either of these recipes. Rather, they are recipes for a lot of food to feed a lot of little kids, and I don't have any little kids around here, so I'm going to be cutting down the recipes. I'm going to make half of the cookies and just a quarter of the soup, and that's still enough soup to fill the biggest pot that I own. And so to make that soup, what you'll need is one number 10 can of tomatoes. This is a number 10 can of tomatoes. It's huge. It is 6 pounds, 6 ounces, or about 2.9 kilograms. The original recipe calls for 4 of these, so 1 is enough. 2/3 of a cup or 75 grams of flour, 1 1/3 cup or 340 grams of smooth peanut butter. Crunchy peanut butter, which I prefer, had come on the market just a couple years previous, but I'm guessing they used smooth peanut butter especially because it is a soup. Also, try to get it with no sugar added because they wouldn't have added a ton of sugar at the time. A half cup or 55 grams of chopped onions and 1½ teaspoons of salt. Then the recipe says to press canned tomatoes through a sieve to remove the seeds. So I tried this and it didn't work, at least not for me. I'd say that my sieve was too fine, but any less fine and the seeds would have gone through, so that doesn't make any sense. And maybe they pureed it beforehand, so that's what I ended up doing. You know, you just kind of got to make it work, I guess. But once you get smooth tomatoes, mix a cup of it with the flour and the peanut butter until it is as smooth as you can get. Then add the onions and the remaining tomato into a large pot and heat it until it starts to boil. Take a bit of that hot tomato and add it to the peanut mixture, stirring it all together, and then add all of that into the pot with the rest of the tomato. Stir in the salt, and then it says cook for about 10 minutes, stirring constantly. Which is what I did, and it gives you just enough time to get completely engrossed in a course from today's sponsor, Wondrium. Wondrium has thousands of courses, tutorials, how-tos, and documentaries on every subject from history to science to food to travel to how to play the guitar. And Wondrium's library is constantly growing, so there's always something new for me to watch. And since I can watch it on my TV or my laptop or my phone, I can carry it around with me so I can even watch while I'm in the kitchen cooking. And since today we're cooking a school lunch, I figured I would watch something on a topic that every school child loves: dinosaurs. The course is called Rediscovering the Age of Dinosaurs. And it turns out there are a lot of things about dinosaurs that we didn't know back when I was in school. Like, I didn't know that there were dinosaurs in Antarctica, but there were. I swear I learn something new every day. And if you want to learn something new every day, then Wondrium is the place for you. You get a free trial when you use my link in the description, wondrium.com/tastinghistory. Just click it or go there to start your free trial today. Now once you signed up for Wondrium and the soup is done, we can start making our cookies. The cookbook gives options for 3 different cookies: oatmeal raisin, molasses, and hermits, which I had never heard of. I guess they're actually still eaten in New England, but I had never heard of them, and everyone who does know of them says that they're pretty good, so I figured I'd give them a shot. So for that, you'll need a bowl to sift in 180 grams of flour with a 1/4 cup or 35 grams of dried skim milk, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Then whisk everything together and add a 1/2 cup or 240 grams of chopped raisins and toss them into the flour mixture, coating them well. A lot of recipes for these call for currants, which are a little bit smaller, and it kind of makes sense because chopping raisins is rather tedious. Then cream together a 1/2 cup or 113 grams of butter with 3/4 of a cup or 160 grams of light brown sugar. Then add 2 beaten eggs and mix until smooth. Then add the flour mixture and gently mix until just combined. Then scoop the dough out onto baking sheets. And since we know that this will make 25 cookies, we'll know exactly how big the cookies would have been in 1934, and spoiler alert, they're a lot smaller than most modern cookies. But even so, bake them at 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 Celsius for 8 to 10 minutes or until they start to brown on top. And while they bake, make sure you're subscribed to Tasting History, which if you think about it is a little bit like school lunch because 1, you learn how to make food, and 2, you get lessons like this one. So when that first school lunch happened is kind of hard to pin down. I mean, I'm sure somebody snuck some hummus and pita into one of Socrates' lectures. But when it comes to more of an organized school lunch, we have to look quite a bit later. Generally, it's accepted that it took place in Munich, Germany in 1790 when the American-born Benjamin Thompson, better known as Count Rumford, organized meals to be served to poor children before they took lessons. Though the children only spent half of the day in classes, they spent the other half making uniforms for the military, just like when I was in kindergarten. In France, school lunches started as gifts from private donors such as the author Victor Hugo, who sponsored an entire school. But in 1867, the Minister of Public Instruction, Victor Duruy, established the first widespread lunch program at over 460 schools. And a decade later, school canteens opened up all over Paris. And these were publicly funded programs that would give hot meals to all of the students. Those who could pay would, and those who couldn't got them for free. And even in the 1870s, the people setting this up knew that kids were bullies and would pick on those kids who got free lunches, and so they made a sort of ticket system so that everyone was anonymous. It was pretty cool. Similar programs came about in what's now Switzerland, Holland, and Germany, though in Germany, when a bill was introduced in the Reichstag in 1897 to provide school lunches in all cities, it was defeated because it was thought that free lunch would entice people to move into the already crowded cities. For a nationwide program, we must look to England, where the Parliament passed the Provision of Meals Act, which aims at securing that for this purpose, suitable meals shall be available just as much for those whose parents are in a position to pay as for those to whom food must be given free of cost. And the meals tended to be quite nice, always including some sort of dessert, like a gypsy tart, a Manchester tart, a treacle pudding, or spotted dick. And I'm assuming that the school children of England found the name just as funny as I did. Spotted dick. Now here in the good old US of A, it took us a little bit longer to get to a widespread lunch program, but there were local programs, like in 1853 when the Children's Aid Society of New York opened a vocational school for children living in poverty, and their attendance came with a meal. There were also penny lunches served in a handful of high schools in Philadelphia and Boston, and later in New York City there were 3 penny lunches because the cost of living in New York City is outrageous. But these programs didn't seem to take off. Most kids got their lunch by either going home at lunch and getting a meal there or bringing their lunch like I did when I was a kid. But the problem with that is that it leaves a lot of people out, i.e. all of the parents that aren't at home at lunch or the parents who can't really afford to give their kid a meal to take to school. Then in 1904, Robert Hunter published a book called Poverty, which, among other things, pointed out that there must be thousands, very likely 60 or 70,000 children in New York City alone who often arrive at school hungry and unfitted to do well the work required. He asked what's the point of truancy laws, which had become pretty standard, making the kids go to school if they are too hungry to actually learn while they're there. Also, I do think it's kind of funny that Robert Hunter, who spent his entire life concerned with poverty in America, ended up living in Montecito, California, which now is maybe the least impoverished place in the whole country. I mean, that's like the home of Prince Harry and Oprah. But it was because of that book and others from the time that there was a newfound effort to feed America's children. By 1912, over 40 cities had lunch programs, often making lunches in central kitchens, then delivering them to schools around the cities. But for those living in rural areas, a lot of the cooking was left up to the teacher. Enter the 1916 book The Rural School Lunch by Nellie Wing Farnsworth. She was of the opinion that the rural children actually had even a greater need for a hearty lunch than their city-dwelling counterparts, because the main meal on the farm was the midday meal, and while they were in school, they weren't at the farm to actually get it. Also, she says that they would have been extra hungry because many had to walk upwards of 6 miles uphill both ways in the snow. And she basically actually says that, and that's always what my grandpa used to say. thought that was kind of funny. Also, during the winter, it might be so cold that should a child bring their lunch carried in a basket or pail, it is often frozen. When the pail or basket is opened, it is found to contain cold pancakes, salt pork, cold potatoes, pie, and bottles of cold tea or coffee. Yes, coffee. It was not uncommon to give children coffee at the time, and I'm going to guess that a room full of over-caffeinated 8-year-olds really makes a teacher's job all that much harder. So it was determined that children should neither drink tea nor coffee, but milk, water, or cocoa. Even cocoa should not be served every day, as it provides a stimulant to many children. But since the kids were arriving at school with frozen food, it was actually up to the teacher to prepare a hot meal. This meant that they had to stock their classroom with, among other things, a 2-burner blue flame oil stove, a portable oven, a frying pan, kettles, egg beaters, and a 2-quart double boiler. Now that is a lot on a teacher's salary, but Miss Farnsworth had a solution. One rural school teacher had a shower. Like a baby shower, but for school lunch. She basically went to the stores in town and made up a list of all the things that she needed. She then sent invitations to all the mothers and women interested in the school, inviting them for a social afternoon and asking that each one bring with her one or more of the utensils which had been selected. And I would like to say that this is a relic of the past and how ridiculous, but since I come from a family of teachers, I know that it's not. Granted, it's not lunch and cooking items, but it is still like scissors and crayons and other things for the classroom that the teachers have to gather money to pay for. It's kind of ridiculous. Now, this book on rural school lunches really encourages that the kids eat together at a table rather than kind of going all over and eating, outside or whatever. This would encourage, among other things, better table manners. It would help their conversation skills, and my favorite reason, mothers will take more pains in putting up the lunch when they know that it is to be exhibited before the other pupils as well as the teacher. That is a mild public shaming to get mothers to send better quality lunches with their children. And so this was the status quo in the 19-teens and 20s, but then came the Great Depression. More children than ever were going hungry because their parents were all out of work, and so the parents couldn't afford the food that America's farmers were producing. So many problems, but one very elegant solution was school lunch. The New Deal allowed the federal government to buy up excess food from the country's farmers. Then they sent that food to school for children to eat, but instead of making the parents or teachers prepare the meal, they put those who were out of work into the kitchens, and thus was born the lunch lady.
It counts as a vegetable.
Now, one side effect of this program was that much of the food that the children began to eat was meat heavy, a lot more pork and beef, because it was those expensive ingredients that were in surplus. So our peanut butter and tomato soup was replaced with Salisbury steak.
Salisbury steak!
The American children were eating high on the hog, and then World War II happened. Surpluses turned into shortages, and schools were subject to the same rationing as everybody else. And the school lunch cookbooks from this period seem to include a lot of canned foods. It also saw just the actual number of school lunches really dwindle, and the effects of this were quickly evident. And so once the war was over in 1946, Congress passed the National School Lunch Act, since, as President Harry S. Truman said, "No nation is any healthier than its children or more prosperous than its farmers." So with decent budgets available for school lunches and school lunch infrastructure, the 1950s and 60s saw the cafeteria become the standard model for handing out school lunches to students. It's also when classic school lunch foods like pizza, fish sticks, and mashed potatoes served via ice cream scoop became popular fare. Of course, with public funds came a lot of lobbying on how to spend those funds, and so how students ate was largely determined by what companies had the most influence in Washington. And so the 1970s saw chips and candy bars and vending machines make their way into the cafetoriums of America. Nutritional guidelines started to dip, and by the 1980s, they fell off a cliff. And this is the area that gives rise to the idea that America once considered ketchup a vegetable, which isn't actually true. It turns out that it was probably just something that somebody said in a meeting maybe in jest, maybe not, but never actually became public policy. But even so, school lunch became increasingly privatized and the portions shrank, yet the calories grew, mostly due to just more added sugar. And that's why my mom always made me take my lunch to school, which was okay as long as I had a really cool lunchbox. But then Lunchables got really popular, and that was the cool thing to bring, and they didn't fit in my really cool lunchbox. So on those few occasions when I could convince my mom to spend money and buy me Lunchables, I had to decide between the Lunchables and the cool lunchbox, and usually I went with the Lunchables in a brown paper bag. These were the things that made me lose sleep when I was 8. But in recent years, it seems that the quality of the food in school lunches has actually started to go back up, and there has been a concerted effort to make them more nutritional. But I think that we're still quite a bit behind most other countries, especially France, who has like full-on meals for the kids with beef bourguignon and brie on freshly baked baguette. And they do it at a lower cost than we do. It's crazy. I don't know how they do it. But, you know, I don't have any beef bourguignon today, nor fresh baguette, but I do have some peanut butter and tomato soup and hermit cookies about ready to eat. So once your cookies are cooled, slap together a butter sandwich with Wonder Bread and you're all set. And here we are, school lunch from the Great Depression. So I gotta say the texture of this doesn't look particularly appetizing. It's kind of gloopy, but it smells good, so let's give it a try. Oh, those poor children. Honestly, it's not even that it tastes bad, because it doesn't taste bad, but it doesn't taste good. I love tomato soup. I love peanut butter. Turns out those two flavors do not go well. They don't make a new flavor. It's more like tomato soup and peanut butter fighting against each other, and nobody wins. Hopefully the hermit cookie will be a little bit better. These smell really, really good. Let's give it a try. You can kind of tell from a cookie how it smells. Actually, that's really, really good. It reminds me of like the flavor of a fruit cake almost, but obviously not the texture. It's like a much softer, chewy texture. I've seen recipes where they kind of spread out more. It's probably just a different quantities of butter and everything in there, but this is more of a chewy cookie, which I really like. Delicious. A- to these. If they had chocolate in it, it would have been an A+. So make sure to follow me on Instagram, Tasting History with Max Miller, and I will see you next time on Tasting History. I'm gonna finish this right now.